coming. My name is Kristen Evangelista. I'm the director of the University Galleries. It is a pleasure to have one of the exhibiting artists, Joiri Minaya, here to be in conversation with the exhibition curator, Dr. Stephanie Rivera Berruz. They are both going to have a conversation about Joiri's work, and I'm just going to do a brief introduction of both of them. So I'll start with Dr. Rivera Berruz received her PhD in philosophy at SUNY Buffalo in 2014. Her main interests lie in social and political philosophy, with an emphasis on philosophy of race and feminist philosophy, as well as Latin American philosophy. She approaches these topics at their intersections as she is committed to the importance of diverse approaches to philosophical praxis. Her dedication to these topics stemmed from an investment in exploring how her own identity as a Latina in philosophy. Her research has explored racial and gendered embodiment, the relationship between language and identity, the concept of boomerang perception in Latina feminist scholarship, and the meta-philosophical question of Latin American philosophy. I'd also like to introduce Joiri Minaya, who lives and works in Manhattan. She holds 2 associate degrees from Altos de Chabón, is that close?
No.
La Romana in the Dominican Republic, and the Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes in Santo Domingo. She received her MFA from Parsons, the New School for Design.
BFA.
Her MFA. Oh, sorry.
BFA.
Or BFA. Sorry. I just promoted you.
It's fine, right?
In 2013, her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including in exhibitions at the Sunroom Project Space, at Wave Hill, at Gutenberg Arts here in New Jersey, at El Museo del Barrio in New York, and she's currently an artist in residence at Smack Melon in Dumbo. She's been the recipient of many awards and grants, including the Rema Hord-Mann Emerging Artist Grant and the Joan Mitchell Foundation Emerging Artist Grant. She's also been invited to numerous residencies. I mentioned Smack Melon, as well as the Artists in the Marketplace program at the Bronx Museum and the Gutenberg Art Space. So it's a pleasure to both have them here today, and thank you so much for joining us. After their conversation, there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just noticed my phone is not on silent, so I'm going to do the thing that I tell my students to do before class all the time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's such a pleasure. So I think the first thing I wanted you to talk to us about is a little bit about your artwork in general. And so this is the piece, right, that we have here. And if you could talk to us a little bit about kind of how you arrived at both the concept, right, and also like the execution of like how you dealt with the materials and how they came into this particular form.
So the 3 art schools I attended were very different and had like different focus. So I was lucky to learn all this, array of techniques. Parsons is very conceptual, and then the schools I went to in the Dominican Republic were had a stronger focus on technique. Okay. So ever since graduating, it's been like trying to balance all of that. And so, and also that like transnational experience has informed my work a lot from growing up in the Dominican Republic. I mean, I was born in the States. I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and then I came back when I got a scholarship from Altos de Chabón to finish my undergrad at Parsons. So those are all things that have ended up informing my practice. I think before I got into Parsons, my work was more about stereotypes within the Dominican Republic, kind of people and domestic spaces, domesticity, gender, starting from the home, the domestic space. And after being here for those 2 years in Parsons, it started to branch out to this more transnational dialogue. trying to kind of understand for myself how I was being perceived, and things like my accent or my looks being ambiguous and not that easily placeable, were things that came often in my day-to-day interactions. So the work kind of started becoming about that. And so this piece here is called #Dominican Women Google Search, and it's a piece that comes from the experience of being asked where my accent is from and where I'm from. And then when I say Dominican, I was met sometimes with people being like, "Oh, Dominican," or whatever reaction that that meant to me like they had some preconceived idea of what that is, or there was something that informed their idea of Dominicanness. And so just as a test, I had this like impulse of Googling Dominican women, and I found all these images of women kind of like in bikinis or scantily clad otherwise, posing for the camera, often with tropical landscapes in the background. And I was kind of confronted with this like dualism, I guess feminist dualism, because I was like, okay, like these women own their own image, they're obviously complicit in this whole image making system, and there is some consent in this kind of representation, but at the same time they are, you know, like they are in control of their image, and I'm sure that they choose to be represented in that way, and I understand that there is power that comes from that position, but at the same time I was also questioning whether they weren't also feeding the same male gaze, this like consuming gaze, putting their bodies in display like that. And so anyway, I started collecting these photos and like just putting them in a folder for like a few weeks or months or whatever time that was. I was at the time doing a piece called Siboney in Centro León, in Santiago in the Dominican Republic. And for Siboney, I was also like doing research on representation of women in the Dominican Republic through the eyes of you know, the people who had the power to represent these images, which were often like criollos, like people of Spanish descent. And anyway, I was in the middle of that when I started doing the Google searches, and then I continued doing that here. And eventually I started just cutting the pieces up in these body parts, kind of following the path that my gaze would take. Just just kind of like whatever the photo was telling me to look at, I would like cut out that part. And that's how this started. And at the same time that I was, so at some point I decided to blow it up to see it in like real human scale, and take it out of the screens that we see these images on. So I printed a couple, like, you know, on a plotter, just parts, and I noticed that it started getting pixelated, or like the pixels were obvious. And I enjoy that layer because it spoke about the way that these images are distributed online and how they're sort of degraded in a way, and that same degradation had a dialogue with the ideas that I was interested in. And at the same time, I felt that cutting them up in pieces was also kind of having some denial of, you know, that availability of that imagery, and in that action of like cutting them up, showing this degradation, but also denying what is demanded from these women. There was a duality that I thought had a conversation with the rest of my works and with my interest in general. So I kept doing that. And at the same time, I was also recombining these body parts and doing other things in terms of bidimensional imagery, and I started doing a postcard series, which I included some.
There's some on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I included like 3 or 4 of those.
Okay.
Because then that also leads into the other works that are on this show. So yeah, that's one of the first postcards I did, and that was like recombining body parts and making new bodies that would that would either mock this gaze or look back at it or kind of frustrate this gaze in a way or another.
Right. Yeah, drawing your attention to something very different than what you would expect to look at, right?
Yeah.
In the process, and then the texture of these, right?
Yeah.
And this one says República Dominicana,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. That's a piece of fabric that I bought in the DR.
Oh, okay.
That says that. When I showed the installation at Wayville, I met a woman who said like, "Oh, I have a pair of pants just like that," but they say Jamaica. So apparently, like this design is, it's interchangeable. They just put the name of another tropical nation, which is interesting.
Right. The representation of the exotic or the Caribbean, right? And women's bodies certainly play a role in that.
Yeah. So yeah, the patterns. I've been interested in pattern design for a while. I think since I was at Altos de Chabón. My mom has a clothing store in the Dominican Republic, so I grew up going with her. She would like rent a car and go to like Reading, Pennsylvania, to the VF outlets and get like all the discount everything, and then resell it in the Dominican Republic, and that's what sustained our family. And also, I mean, eventually she found. Now she travels to Los Angeles and she goes to like fashion fairs. So I grew up surrounded by fabric and pattern.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I, what I place as like the origin of my interest in pattern design. And but then when I was at Parsons and after I graduated from there, I think Hawaiian shirts were on fashion, like vintage Hawaiian shirts, hipster land, Brooklyn people.
I don't know, are they still in fashion?
I think so.
Okay.
I think in the summer they come back in fashion. And I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt for school one day, and someone said like, "Ooh, tropical," and that was another moment that I was like, "Oh, what does this mean?"
Right,
and then I realized that this design has nothing to do with my experience of growing up in the tropics. So. That's when I started thinking about it critically and using it in my work as a point of reference to this kind of regurgitated identity, or like this identity that is looked at from an outsider's perspective, and how tropical pattern could be a signifier for this. So I kept using it in my work.
Yeah, and a sign of consumption, right?
Yeah.
To be consumed and to be worn, and a way to travel without traveling, a way to come in contact with bodies without having to come in contact with them, right? Are all at stake there. What else do we have on the PowerPoint?
Oh, well, yeah, then there's a couple of the postcards, because they took like different directions. So like the first one was more recombining. I made like 25 or 30, but I only chose 25. I took, I think, 4 or 5 and put them in there as like representing different directions that the postcards took.
Yeah.
So the first one is like recombining, and I have a couple of those. And then this one was like this like act of denial and this idea of like, I'm not gonna give you anything original. I'm just gonna play with these things that are already in media, and put them in a critical way that would kind of like a mirror or like returning that gaze. And that's what I've been doing for a while. So this one I was covering the body with the pattern, and then I pixelated the pattern, or I chose like I found like a low resolution photo of a pattern, and I put it there because the other works in the exhibition are these bodysuits that came from this postcard and from another postcard.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because this is the same pose as one of the bodysuit images that's upstairs.
Yeah. And there's a couple photos like this, just like women with this pose. I was so interested in the poses too, because I noticed like I always post like this in photos since I was little.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like a Dominican post, but it's something that I recognize
Right.
from like people in my family. And yeah, I don't know. I felt kind of related to these things that I was looking at in these images.
Right.
So
right.
when you see the body, the Dominican women Google search pieces, they usually have like
Right,
they
that's
have like an
the-
arm
yeah,
or like
yeah.
a leg, or like they're in particular poses that I'm interested in. Yeah, and then I don't know if we want to go to the next one.
Oh.
Yeah,
Right,
so
right,
that's
right.
that one is so part of in the postcard series I started combining these images that I found from the Dominican Google search with images from art history, and Gauguin has a special place in my folder of like things that I want to deal with. And this is a painting by Gauguin, which caught up in this way and combined in this way makes this image which to me is very strong. And
Yeah.
so there's a couple of those. There's like 4 or 5 images that are this like recombination of bodies from the Dominican Women Google search, images with images from art history. And there's Gauguin, and I think Grau Araujo, which is a Venezuelan painter that has this painting called Mulata Cartagenera or something like that.
Okay.
And it's just, again, like this brown woman just like, being very available, like the way that her body is depicted. Yeah, and there's always like this man painting these representations, which, yeah,
Right.
it's something that I want to comment on.
Yeah.
And then I think, yeah, and this one, I mean, it doesn't necessarily relate to the work that is upstairs, but I just really like it. I think it's hilarious. And I want to make some more of this. I dropped some postcards. Last time I was in the Dominican Republic, I went to Cabareta, which is like this really touristic town, and I just like surreptitiously dropped some postcards in gift shops.
So you just left them
I just
there?
left them.
Okay.
They were sold for 25 pesos if someone got them,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have my information in the back. No one has written to me, but they're out there. And this is one of the ones that I was like really into leaving there. And then
Yeah.
I think the rest is just the photos, the three photos that are upstairs.
Upstairs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you start the postcard like dropping?
That was in
phenomenon?
November. I only did
You
it
just
once.
did it
I want to
once.
redo it next time I'm in the DR, but that was just last time I was there.
You were there. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe I get to do some more postcards before I keep dropping them.
It's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, interrupting them.
I bought, I take a lot of screenshots, and I have this folder full of screenshots. And at some point I took a screenshot of a website called Tropical Gaze, like a year or 2 years ago. And it was an Australian website for selling, I think wallpaper or something like that, but like interior decoration that was tropical. And I found that screenshot recently, a couple months ago, and when I looked up the website again, it didn't exist.
Oh.
So I went to GoDaddy and bought it. So now I have this website where I hope to sell these postcards at some point when I get organized and like learn HTML or whatever, or like hire someone. I don't know. Yeah,
To sell them.
Yeah, I have this website now where
That's wonderful.
yeah.
All right, let's have a look at the ones upstairs. Container series. Okay, this is the first one.
Okay.
So where did you take this photo?
I took it at, I was in the Dominican Republic with my family, and my mom, who loves all-inclusive resorts, which I hate, found this kind of mix, because she grew up in the countryside and I grew up in the city, so I understand that she doesn't really like nature at all, because like, not at all, but like she thinks of nature as this like dirt, germs kind of thing.
Right.
And I understand that because like growing up in the countryside in the Dominican Republic, like she was probably exposed to that version of nature more than I was growing up in the city. And I romanticize nature a lot. I like going camping and things like that. But anyway, I was visiting, and she was like, I found this resort that is like a mix between both of our interests. It's like all included, but it's a natural resort where like they have like this river that they like deviated into the pools, and it's all natural. So when I got there, we got there at like 5 p.m. or something, and we were only staying overnight. It's in the east of the country. I can't remember the name. I should know this, but I can't remember. And there's this like little bridge, and there's this like concrete floor that leads the water from the river into the man-made pool with like rocks and stuff, looking natural. And I was interested in like this whole like natural, artificial, man-made thing that this place was. Although that's not necessarily the focus of the photo, but I love the lighting at like 6 p.m. So, and we were only staying there for a day, so there wasn't gonna be another chance to get that light. And it was already dark when I thought, oh, maybe this is a good place to take this photo. Because when I was, during this trip, I started this thing where I was thinking of my work and the postcards, and I went to buy fabric, and I found this like upholstery, is that like sofa fabric?
Oh, okay.
Which is really hard and uncomfortable. But I found this fabric that had tropical design, and I started sewing this suit, and then this trip came up, and I was like, okay, I'll take this suit with me. Maybe I find a location where I can take a photo with it. And so when I got to this hotel, I was like, okay, I want to take a photo in that spot, but it was already dark. So I made my family wake up at 6 a.m. so I could get a similar light. And my sister shot it, and my mom is like outside of the frame because I need some help to lay down. And then that's me in the suit.
Right, so that's you in the suit.
Yeah. So that's where the photo's taken.
Where it was taken. Yeah, the representation of nature, right?
Yeah.
Profound. It's funny because it looks staged, but it's
not,
right? And how that gets negotiated in an image.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the next one we have? Oh, Chris and I keep...
Okay, I don't want to rush you, but I know about the...
This one.
Mm-hmm. This one was at Wave Hill in the Bronx.
Yeah, I found this image so eerie the
Yeah.
first time I saw it when I walked into your studio, and so did my colleague, who I think has already left us, Dr. Steinhardt. Immediately walked in, he's like, I have seen this in nightmares, is what he said. He's like, this is wonderful, but I've seen it in nightmares, and he was like really stunned by it as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, I wanted him to be here for this because he had to go teach, but because it's got like a weird presence, a somber presence to it almost. But so you took this in
Wave
Hill,
Mm-hmm.
and the location just randomly picked it, or?
I was looking for a place where I could have like that kind of scenery, and I was thinking of like my location choices and how I kind of wanted to blur that, like, because if I keep going to the Dominican Republic to make photos there, then I'm in a way, I'm having this dialogue about landscape representation, but in a way I'm also reiterating this like representation of the tropical landscape.
Yeah.
Or like this need for this type of landscape for that commentary to be made, and I was wondering if I could play with that and take the photos elsewhere.
Okay.
And then I'm here all the time, so like, it made sense to take photos here.
Yeah.
I like that it's like kind of lush and jungle-like, but it's like a very American landscape, maybe, if I could say that. At least like global north, like these plants belong to a certain geography that is not necessarily what you would find in the DR, but people often think that I shot it there. So I'm interested in that, in that like back and forth. And when I made this suit, what I liked about the fabric was like this camouflage aspect, and it's not the type of design that I think of as tropical design in this like, as other designs are that are more like scientific illustration, and then there's all this history of like the explorers in the Americas like 3 centuries ago, and this like yeah, like this, how do you say this? I forget a word, but this kind of violent scientific thing of like analyzing other people in their spaces. And then, you know, with the excuse of scientific knowledge, but like done in a very violent way. So like that's what I think when I see the tropical design that is more like scientific illustration, that is really pretty, and I really like visually, but then it brings up all of those associations. And this one, opposed to that, is kind of just like this more generic camouflage undetermined pattern. At the time, so I think I took this photo after a performance I made with these bodysuits at Socrates Sculpture Park in Queens, where I had women, 4 Dominican women, in the suits, holding poses, holding the poses that were determined by the suits. And I recorded audio tracks based on scripts that I wrote that are in part my own writing and in part things that I found online. And the audio track that I made for this suit was about camouflage and mimicry and those things as like biological, you know, animal things to like survive, to not be eaten by other animals. So like this evolutionary trait. And then also interweaving that with the immigrant experience, where you have to get rid of your accent, you have to get rid of like markers of difference, and just talking about that back and forth. So then it made sense to me to take like the more like photographic stage photo version of this suit to gravitate to a space like this, and in relation to that pattern.
The body assimilates.
Yeah. And then the body is still contained, and in this particular pose, although like this pose is more indeterminate, just like the first one, which is like just this sack.
Right.
And but I wanted it to be like a standing figure. But again, like I think the decisions of the pose are not as determined as they're getting to in more recent works. Like the last one, for example, which is definitely like a more determined pose. Yeah.
Is that the next one we have on this line?
Yeah, that's the final one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
A very determined pose in this one. And in this one, did you have your eyes cut out on this bodysuit?
Yeah, you can see. I think like the suits are evolving. Like I'm taking different decisions every time I make one. And this one and another suit, which is red, which I might want to remake with a different pattern, but is the one that I call the garden suit, and I want to photograph it in like a more gardeny space. Both of them have like spaces for the eyes. In the red one, you can see like fully like an eye hole, and this one is just like this tiny little weird hole that you can see that you're being seen, but like you can't really look into the eyes of the person who's looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know if it's a person.
Yeah.
Right, like that even that seems to be up for grabs in terms of you, the viewer of the image, right? Of what's staring back at you, right? This is that. It looks like such a beautiful day.
That was such a weird day. It was so in the DR there was crazy rains and crazy weather for the whole fall and winter. And when I was visiting there, I must have spent like a month, and there was not a single day that it didn't rain. And this is the day, like right as I'm getting to the airport back to New York, we stopped at the beach and we got like a little ray of sun, and that's what you're seeing. But everything around it is just cloudy and gray. But it worked out.
Wonderful. So, shall we open up the floor for some questions? 'Cause
Yeah,
I feel
sure.
like I've been asking you a whole bunch.
That's okay.
Questions from the general audience and from my students. You didn't have to read for today. You had to come up with one question for today. So, Nick.
One of the photographs in the exhibit upstairs was entitled "Over My Dead Body," and it's like in front of what I imagine is a courthouse.
Over my dead body?
Yeah.
That may have been Nona's work.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, apologize.
Because I don't think I have that title.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Then never mind my question. My bad.
That's okay. I didn't mention it. I'm from Santo Domingo. My dad is from El Cibao, and then my mom is from Barahona, which is in the south. But I'm more in, like, I grew up more interacting with my mom's side of the family, so mostly Santo Domingo, but I go a lot to Barahona. Yeah.
In which country do you prefer doing your work?
That's something that I'm maybe starting to be more decisive about. Definitely these works are things that come from living here and trying to think of this idea of representation and playing with the signifiers that are already there. And I don't mind the work being shown in the DR, and I'm sure that would spark different conversations there. But it's not the audience that I was thinking of when I first made it. I think that when I made work for there, maybe I think of other things or other approaches, but that's something that I'm starting to be more decisive about, or like an element, like another layer to the work, or like what's the main audience or where is it presented at. Yeah.
I saw that you painted it on wallpaper. Was that like a practical reason for doing it, or was it related to art?
I think it's kind of both, although I've now produced this series in like photographic print. I have made wallpaper that is printed on wallpaper. And I think from just having that resource, I was like, oh, I can print photos like this. Originally, I started printing them on wallpaper because I could blow them up really cheap, as opposed to like a photographic print that costs you like $500 on that scale. And it ended up looking really nice, and I was into the aesthetic of just having that glued to the wall. But it's not necessarily like a conceptual thing behind it. It was more practicality. And now that I've started printing them on photographic paper, they might stay like that. Although I like the idea of printing on wallpaper to relate it to the actual medium. Yeah. Hi. No, a lot of them, so like for the Dominican women Google search, the pieces that are hanging, those are mostly Hawaiian shirts, and they're mostly men Hawaiian shirts because those are come in bigger sizes, and I have more space to cut. But I also like the idea of like men Hawaiian shirt and then the images of Dominican women,
yeah.
and this whole like system of consumption. And then the ones for the bodysuit, I source in different places. I try to go to fabric stores when I go to the Dominican Republic, and there isn't a lot of production of tropical prints there, except for the very touristic ones like this one and the green one that was in one of the postcards that said Dominican Republic. But I had to like hunt those down. Like they don't necessarily proliferate there. And then here I found quite a few, and I've also like bought a couple yards from those. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What inspired you to take pictures in nature, especially one with Mars?
Can you repeat pictures in nature, especially what?
What inspired you to take pictures in nature, especially one with Mars?
Okay. Um, I was originally interested in how women were photographed against nature and this whole representation thing. Like metaphorically, I see colonization as like this very male act, at least how it's represented in history. And you know, this like colonization of women's body and colonization of landscape was something that I wanted to address. I don't want to reinforce the idea that like women and landscape are interchangeable and like all of these metaphors of like the Mother Earth and whatnot. Like I think that could be interesting sometimes, but in my experience, it's more stereotypical than anything else. So that's something that I'm trying to comment on as well. And that's why I'm interested in landscape. Yeah. That's okay.
So if you stayed in the States, if you lived there, you can still be inspired to make these art pieces?
If I had grown up in the States as a Dominican, I'm not sure. Maybe, but I mean, possibilities. If you know, that's like endless. I think part of the reasons I'm inspired to make this work is because of the disconnect that I find between the representation and the experience. So maybe if I had grown up here, I wouldn't have that same experience. So I would probably be making different work. Yeah, there's plenty of Dominican American artists that have grown up here that have super interesting dialogues and images.
Oh, wow. Like all three at once. So I think Megan and then Carlos and then Steve.
Would you ever like find more concrete fabrics and like do it against a more like urban setting or?
Concrete as representing concrete?
Yeah, like maybe like a fabric where there's like buildings on it and like with like a city background.
I have thought of using the urban landscape. I haven't thought of fabrics that represent concrete. I don't know if I've seen many of those. Maybe I would have to design, like, you know, order them if I wanted to do something like that. But my interest in tropical landscape is like just like how it's, not tropical landscape, tropical pattern design is how it's a thing that is like in wider popular culture and that is loaded with meaning. So I'm kind of building up on that meaning. I don't know if a pattern that represents concrete would do the same. But the landscape, like the urban landscape, is something that I've thought about, and I haven't like necessarily figured out how I would be interested in using that. But it's something in my mind. Yeah. That was like.
Yeah, I just want to know, like, what are the bodysuits made out of? And did you paint them, or do they come like that?
They come with that pattern, so they come printed. It's just like when you buy yards of printed fabric, and they're made of fabric. So the fabric on the top one of that is a stretch, like polyester, I guess, fabric, and the one underneath is not stretchy. So I had to like really try to make good pants that someone can put in. And I'm not a seamstress. Like if someone who actually sews looks at my bodysuits, they'll probably be horrified. But they work for the photos and for the performances. Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah, I enjoyed your work a lot. I guess I have one question about the bodysuit and these forms. It almost seems like an abstract body, but I can tell that it's a body, and it looks to me like, you know, I can see how it goes together and what shape and what pose. But the other images, which I guess more like Google search kind of stuff, I also am sort of confused, like in an interesting way, like how that body goes together and stuff.
Yeah.
So I noticed that. I guess I'm commenting that I noticed, but also I wonder how in your work are you thinking about the body are you thinking about the body as something that is kind of an abstract?
Is what?
Is kind of abstract,
Mhm.
something that we inhabit, we have this complicated view about, or gaze, use that word.
Yeah.
It's also kind of natural in some way, right? You're putting these sort of, I'm thinking of the waves, it reminds me of parts of it. It's got a lot of moving, interesting ideas. So maybe I just ask you to say, if you could say more things about how you see the body as something natural, and also maybe something kind of constructed, put together in our mind.
Yeah, sure. I agree with everything you're saying. Yeah. You were interested in the hanging pieces of the Dominican Legal
So
Church.
the hanging pieces, right? They're jaggy and they're flat and they're, I guess, maybe plastic or something. I think
Yeah.
the material is. It's very interesting. All of it is. But
Yeah, it's. I mean, it has a lot of layers. I made it for particular reasons and through a particular process that was kind of like naturally evolving. But once the work is there, I can definitely see a lot of a lot of interpretations that have a nice dialogue with the reasons why I made it. And the jagged edge is definitely like a nice layer of it, and again tying it to like representation and like this kind of like I'm like thinking of a lot of things. Opacity, denial, denial as in denial to denying this desire to see this very pristine image. Instead, you have this pixelated one, and also this like multiplicity in the representation of the body. Like I found it at the same time kind of, like a carnage, like all these body parts hanging. Mm-hmm. And while it's that, it's also like a liberating gesture that, the body is not a definite thing and representation of certain people is not a definite thing. And like there's all of these parts that are combined, and as you move around, they change and they get recombined, and it's never quite complete. So I think thinking about it from all of those different points of views is like this complex dialogue that is still having a dialogue and informing each part of it, and that's something that is really pleasing to me, and I hope for like whoever sees it too. Yeah.
I have more of a comment than a question about the question that she asked. I was born in the Dominican Republic.
Say.
Oh, sorry. I have more of a comment than a question about what she asked earlier.
What did she ask? I think.
Maya.
Oh.
Yeah. She asked if you think that you make different work.
Right.
If
Okay.
you grew up here. Well, I was born in the Dominican Republic, but I grew up here, and speaking from experience and knowing other people who, like friends who were born there and grew up here, it's a topic that we talk a lot about. And
which is what is the topic?
Your topic about colonialism.
About what?
Yeah,
colonization.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's something that we're also very interested.
Okay.
And I think it's because like even when you come to this country, you don't really let go of the culture.
Right.
And you're kind of reminded of everything. It's kind of like you're still there, depending on like what time you grew up and stuff.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying that it's not like a relatable experience. I'm sure like it's. I also have like a lot of friends who are the opposite of my history, which is like they were born there and they grew up here, or like they have different combinations. They go back and forth on summers and like spend years there or whatever. And I wasn't necessarily saying that it wasn't relatable, but like that I was just thinking of my friends who are artists who make work about identity, and they're Dominican. I don't necessarily see an interest in tropical imagery per se. They talk about their experience through other kind of imagery. So that's what I was thinking about. But I mean, I'm sure it could be the case that someone who was born there and grew up here also finds this like as useful imagery to have the conversation that
And
they're
it's
interested
also
in.
about like we're all like a product of our environment.
Right. Yeah.
But I love your work. It's like,
Thank you. That's awesome to hear. Hi.
Hi. When you were talking about your Google searching for Dominican women, was there like did you pick like the first 5 you saw? Like, was there like a certain requirement that that made you choose the pictures that you chose?
Yeah. A lot of them are scantily clad women. There are some politicians and there are some athletes. And I did other Google searches where the ratios are a little more leveled. I think if you do like whatever women Google search, you'll still get a lot of scantily clad women. Like Asian women is like one particular type of representation of Asian women, or like, and that would be more of a cliche, like Asian women, Russian women, Venezuelan women is also like pretty loaded. But I don't know. I think Jamaican women have more athletes, and like other nationalities have like more politicians. But the thing is, when I looked up, which is the original one, which is the Dominican women Google search, that was the sort of representation that catch my eye. Not only because it's meant to catch your eye, but because of how many there were. Like literally, you had to scroll down for a bit before you found a different kind of representation. Yeah.
I'm curious also about the cyber aspect of your searches, for your source material. And I'm wondering about like the way in which the internet informs how we should be.
How the internet informs how we see?
Yeah, because based on like the metadata collected of all the searches you've ever done, and I wonder about like the tailored spitback of your searches.
What is that?
Like the tailored regurgitation of the searches that the internet displays for you. And I'm curious about like geographically searching on different people's computers and different accesses to Wi-Fi's, and if there will be like a change in the representation.
Yeah, I looked it up in the DR and I looked it up here, which is the locations where I'm at the most, and I had very similar results. I don't remember it varying a lot. And I've also looked it up from different computers. And it's also like pretty much the same. I do think it's interesting what you're asking though, like about whether the internet informs our views or is it the opposite? It's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing, although so like I talked about this work at I-Beam with other people who are like more techie and more like interested in like the internet and all of that, and they were bringing up some really interesting facts about how, you know, the internet and Google specifically is thought of as this neutral platform where things have like different, like an equal amount of visibility, but it's not. And we were reading in preparation for that panel. We found some we were sent some links by the moderator, among which there was a few talking about tagging and like that incident that happened where like
Leslie Jones.
what is it?
Leslie Jones.
Who is Leslie Jones?
I don't know.
Oh.
She got like skewered on social media.
She got what?
Skewered. She was
What
just
does that
like really exploited
Assaulted?
and assaulted.
Oh, well, yeah, that has happened to a few people. But like one of the cases that we were reading about was about, I think Google did an app that organized your photos and it would tag it, you know, like building photos, whatever. And there was this photo of 2 black people that were labeled as monkeys by this program. So like, that's like a very literal example of how this is absolutely not neutral, and that the people who are coming up with these tags and these descriptions and these descriptors are people. And if the people behind those ways of organizing things are mostly one demographic, which doesn't have like a lot of diversity in it, you will end up with the same stereotypes that are out there in the world. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up that example because it was like a very good example of how these ways of representation are not neutral at all. Like ideally, it's like, okay, so people feed this machine, and like if a lot of people are like feeding this machine with the same images, then those are the most popular photos, or like those are the ones that are clicked the most, and then like the system is not the system is neutral in the way that it's representing what the people are doing with it. And I guess part of that may be true, but then also you could, say the same about scientific knowledge. And again, going back to this idea of like the explorers, like 3-4 centuries ago, going into the jungles of South America and representing indigenous women naked in ways that were exploitative. They're making like very particular sorts of imagery in the name of science. So I think you can link all of those things and see hierarchies and stereotypes within all of them.
I was going to ask, in terms of assimilation and representation, do you feel like you're at a constant struggle even now with between being yourself and assimilating into American culture?
No, I think I'm like lucky to be in like a very liberal city and a very liberal spaces that promote diversity and being yourself and uniqueness, even though like in real life that doesn't necessarily play off like that. But I think that I feel very safe in being myself as much as I can be. And I mean, that's gonna change the more I live here, or like if I go back to the DR or if I move elsewhere. All of these ideas are going to be informing of this. I lived in Belgium for a year when I was 17 as an exchange student, and that was also like a very particular experience that informed a lot of this work in ways that isn't necessarily like, like what I'm putting forward. Like, I think that experience resurfaced after being here and seeing parallels in being seen as other in like this whole different way, because like, there is this precedent of Latino-ness, Dominican-ness, even Afro-Latino-ness, which is apparently like a hard thing to understand. Right. But there's a precedent for all that here, whereas in the little town in Belgium where I lived in, there was absolutely no precedent for a lot of things that I represented for the people around me. And then that brings forward like different sorts of experiences and different ways of relating to people. But yeah, I don't really feel pressure to assimilate to anything, but I am constantly reminded that I am different. So like, people would comment on my accent or wonder where I'm from, or wonder what mix am I, or so I'm definitely reminded that like there's something to be questioned about my personhood. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think your work very much responds to that question.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Of the attempt to categorize and or consume and or put into some sort of intelligibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to rupture the very possibilities of being intelligible to someone who asks those types of questions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Of where are you from, or why do you speak the way you do, or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Any others? Questions? Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely wonderful to have you here in person.
Thanks.